Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Millennium TV News. This is Ishrat Jahan with the top stories. Amur Ekushe International Mother Language Day observed at UN Mission. Stay watchful against distortion of Bangla Prime Minister. Trump wins decisively in South Carolina, Clinton clinches Nevada. Republican Jeb Bush ends 2016 presidential campaign. Violence rages in Syria as Kerry and Lavrov reach provisional deal on ceasefire. Viewers, now the detail. The Permanent Mission of Bangladesh to United Nations observed the Language Martyrs Day and International Mothers Language Day with the active participation from the high-level delegation from the world body, foreign diplomats and members of the Bangladesh community. The program commenced with the presentation of the theme song from Sri Chinmoy Bodhi Group, and all the participants and guests observed a minute's silence in honor of the martyrs afterwards. The guests, including UN Secretary General and Coordinator of Multilingualism Catherine Pollard, Under Secretary General and Chief of Department of Public Information Christina Gallagher, permanent representatives of Poland, Maldives, Sierra Leone, Sri Lanka and Hungary were present on the occasion among others. They laid wreaths of Shohid Minar built on the premises of the mission. Bangladesh Permanent Representative to the UN Masood bin Momen welcomed the guests and started the episode of discussion. It is the language movement that paved the way for the movement for independence, war of liberation, and finally resulted in the birth of a free and sovereign country. Underscoring the need for further enriching Bangla, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on Sunday called for building massive awareness to avoid deformation of mother language. We want people to know different language, but in doing so there shouldn't be any distortion of our language, and everyone should remain aware and cautious in this regard. Massive awareness should be created among people, she said. The Prime Minister was inaugurating a 4-day program marking the International Mother Language Day 2016 and the Martyrs Day at the International Mother Language Institute in the city. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump rolled to victory on Saturday in South Carolina in a contest that saw former Florida Governor Jeb Bush drop out, while Democratic hopeful Hillary Clinton beat back a strong challenge from Bernie Sanders in Nevada. The victories by Trump, who is running as an anti-establishment outsider, and Clinton, a prominent political insider, solidified their positions as the frontrunners to win their parties' respective nominations ahead of November 8th presidential election. The night's most prominent casualty, Bush suffered a 4th-place finish in the Republican contest and announced he has suspended his campaign, ending his dream of becoming a third Bush president after his father and brother. The people of Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina have spoken, and I really respect their decision, an emotional Bush said in Columbia. He finished far out of the running in each of the first 3 states by winning both South Carolina and New Hampshire and holding leads in 13 states that hold Republican contests. On March 1, Trump was arguably on track to win the nomination, an outcome that seemed outstanding to contemplate when he entered the race last summer. Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush said on Saturday he was suspending from his campaign after a disappointing finish in the South Carolina primary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bush, who also fairly poorly in earlier contests in Iowa, New Hampshire, said the race had been hard-fought, but other voters of these 3 states had spoken. In what appeared to be a jab at Republican frontrunner Donald Trump, whom Bush has accused of lacking ideas, the former Florida governor said, "Ideas matter, policy matters." Bush, the son of former President George H.W. Bush and brother to former President George W. Bush, entered the 2016 campaign as the favorite, but was unable to convert a sizable fundraising advantage into success at the polls.
I congratulate my competitors that are remaining on the island on their success for a race that has been hard fought, just as the contest for the presidency should be, because it is a tough job. In this campaign, I have stood my ground.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, and on Sunday he and Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov had reached a provisional agreement on terms of a cessation of hostilities in Syria, and the sides were closer at a ceasefire than ever before. Meanwhile, violence continued to rage in Syria. Multiple bomb blasts in a southern district of Damascus killed at least 87 people on Sunday, the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said. The twin car bombs killed at least 59 people in homes, the monitoring group said. Russian airstrikes launched in September against rebels fighting President Bashar al-Assad have exacerbated suffering and destruction in Syria, where a 5-year-old civil war was killed more than 250,000 people. Assad said on Sunday he was ready for a ceasefire on condition terrorists did not use a lull in fighting to their advantage and that countries backing the insurgents stopped supporting them. The Syrian opposition had earlier said it had agreed to the possibility of a temporary truce provided there were guarantees Damascus allies, including Russia, would ceasefire ceases were lifted and aid deliveries were allowed countrywide.
I anticipate that our presidents, President Obama and President Putin, may well speak somewhere in the next days or so in order to try to complete this task.
Viewers, my Arab Spring clinging to hope in Morocco. US rejected North Korea peace talks offer before last nuclear test, State Department. France to evict 1,000 migrants from camp near Calais. Pope calls for worldwide abolition of death penalty. Viewers, let's move to the next news. People have the power to bring about changes, but first they need a unified message. Rashid El-Beghiti, a freelance journalist from Morocco, told his story to media. To me, the Arab Spring was a peaceful civil movement by young people who had grown tired of political, economic and social stagnation. Through different creative forms of protest, they demanded freedom, dignity and social justice. The movement went beyond ideological differences. To achieve success, one must first forego the illusion that everything is under control and that there is no way for the people to bring about change. The failure of Morocco's uprising stemmed from the mentalities of certain communities rather than the nature of movement itself. Illiteracy and poverty were stumbling blocks in delivering the discourse of the Arab Spring in Morocco and mobilizing people around it. The United States rejected a North Korean proposal to discuss a peace treaty to formally end of Korean War because it did not address denuclearization on the peninsula, the State Department said on Sunday. State Department spokesman John Kirby made the comment in response to a Wall Street Journal report that the White House secretly agreed to peace talks just before Pyongyang's latest nuclear bomb test. The newspaper, citing U.S. officials familiar with the events, said the Obama administration dropped its condition at Pyongyang takes steps to curtail the nuclear arsenal before any peace talks take place, instead calling for North Korea's atomic weapons program to be just one part of the discussion. Pyongyang declined the proposal and its January 6 nuclear test ended the diplomatic plans, the newspaper reported. To be clear, it was the North Koreans who proposed discussion of a peace treaty, Kirby said in an emailed statement. London Mayor Boris Johnson said that he would back Britain's exit from the European Union. He says it was an agonizingly difficult decision, but London Mayor Boris Johnson had decided to back Britain's exit from the European Union. The country will vote in June on whether to stay in or go. London Mayor Boris Johnson saying,
I've decided after a huge amount of heartache, because I did not want to do anything. The last thing I wanted was to go against David Cameron or the government. But after a great deal of heartache, I don't think there's anything else I can do. I will be advocating vote leave.
His decision is a big blow to Prime Minister David Cameron, who had implored Johnson not to join the campaign for the so-called Brexit. Cameron said a deal struck on Friday in Brussels and other EU leaders would give Britain special status in the bloc. But Johnson said the deal fails to deliver fundamental reform. French authorities want hundreds of migrants to vacate a camp near Calais nicknamed the Jungle, called undignified living conditions. Thousands of people fleeing poverty and war have made this camp their temporary home over the past year as they wait to enter Britain. Now French authorities are asking the migrants to evacuate the southern portion of the camp, nicknamed the Jungle, citing undignified living conditions. Authorities said they will offer 750 migrants space in a state-run shelter made of converted shipping containers, but the response has been mixed. Pakistani migrant Aziz saying,
because it's like a prison for us. What we do in the container, we are not coming here to stay. We just came here just to go jump over to the UK.
Afghan migrant Shamim saying,
we live here, this is so good. Before that, we live in jungle. The jungle is so cold over there. We not have some place for some sleeps and some blankets for horse. When we come here 1 week, we live here. Here is so good. We sleep normal and we sleep so good.
The migrants from the jungle camp have come until Tuesday to leave. Authorities will start evicting them on Wednesday before they flatten the southern part of the camp for good. Pope Francis calls for a worldwide abolition of the death penalty and a moratorium on executions, throwing his weight behind the international conference against the death penalty that starts Monday. Pope Francis called for a worldwide ban on the death penalty on Sunday and a moratorium for any executions during the current Holy Year of Mercy, which will end in November. The commandment, "You shall not kill," is just as valid for the innocent as for the guilty, the Pope told crowds at the Vatican. The 1.2 billion member Catholic Church for centuries allowed the death penalty in extreme cases, but the position began changing under the late Pope John Paul, who died in 2005. "I appeal to the consciences of those who govern to reach an international consensus to abolish the death penalty, and I propose that especially among the Catholics to make a courageous and exemplary gesture that no sentence is executed in this Holy Year of Mercy," he said. Francis made the comments to throw his weight behind an international conference against the death penalty starting Monday in Rome and organized by the St. Edgar Community, a worldwide Catholic peace and justice group. From surfing dogs in Australia to well-groomed ones in New York to a presidential candidate that barks like a dog, canines dominate the largest animal stories from around the globe. It's a dog's life in this week's news. From a litter of puppies they were found by a hiker where they had been left to die out in Arizona desert, to these dogs they were rescued from a burning home in Minnesota and fitted with special oxygen masks designed for pets. These dogs in Australia take the term constant companions to a new level. After champion surfer Chris de Aboitiz rescued them and trained them to share his passion, some of the world's best-groomed dogs showed up in New York for the annual Westminster Dog Show. That feels good, but the dog top story of the week came from Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, who wished for an imaginary dog that would bark when he heard a lie so she could use it on her Republican opponents.
We need to get that dog and follow them around, and every time they say these things, like, oh, you know, the Great Recession was caused by too much regulation, arf, 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 you know?
And those are the top animal stories of the week.
Hundreds of Turkish protesters demonstrating against a round-the-clock curfew clashed with police in Diyarbakir, one of the largest cities of the mainly Kurdish southeast province. Hundreds of protesters clashed with police on Sunday in Turkey's southeast city of Diyarbakir as they demonstrated and denounced a round-the-clock curfew. Protesters hurled stones at police who retaliated with tear gas and water cannon. Enclosed by Roman city walls, Diyarbakir Sur district has been under round-the-clock since December 2, 2015. Southwestern Turkey has endured its worst violence in 2 decades since a two-year-old ceasefire between a state and Kurdistan Worker Party militants collapsed in July last year, reviving a conflict that has killed 40,000 people since 1984. The streets of Damascus became chaotic following 4 bomb attacks claimed by Islamic State militants that killed at least 62 people on the same day that separate attacks in homes killed at least 52, making it one of the deadliest days of violence in the civil war. Even by the standards of serious civil war, the death toll on Sunday was especially grim. At least 62 people were reportedly killed and nearly 200 injured in multiple suicide bomb attacks and a car bomb explosion claimed by Sunni Islamic State in the southern district of the capital, Damascus. The explosions hit a district which is home to a Shiite shrine. This happened the same day separate bomb blast killed at least 52 people in the city of Homs, although there was no immediate claim of responsibility for those attacks. Voters in the poor Western African nation cast their ballots in an election marred by fears of extremist violence and accusation of political repression against incumbent President Mahamadou Issoufou. Voters in Niger headed to the polls to cast their ballot in a tense presidential vote. The Western African country has closed its borders and ramped up security to foil possible unrest or militant attacks, with security forces patrolling the main cities and villages even as voters lined up to vote. Incumbent President Mohamedou Issoufou, seen here at a polling station in the capital Niamey, is under fire from rivals who claim he has used political repression to silence the opposition. Thousands of troops are deployed in the northern state of Haryana in a massive show of force to quell protests and have killed 10 people and severely hit water supplies for some of Delhi's 20 million residents. A week-long protest over unemployment by Hindu rural caste in northern state of Haryana near Delhi has intensified, bringing the death toll to at least 10 and more than 100 injured. Some 9,000 troops and paramilitaries have been deployed in the state in a massive show of force to quell the violence. The protesters demand government jobs and spaces in school and colleges as competition for those becomes more fierce in India. They have hit water supplies to Delhi, a metropolis of 20 million people, damaged and burned buildings. In the city of Rewari, protesters were squatting on railway tracks, forcing the cancellation of some 600 trains. At least 7 trains were set on fire. Area schools were ordered to stay closed on Monday as protesters vow not to move until their demands are met. The violence threatens to undermine Prime Minister Narendra Modi's campaign platforms of job and growth and his promises of better days to come. At least 46 people are killed in twin car bomb blast in Homs as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry reaches a provisional agreement with a Russian counterpart for a cessation of hostilities in Syria. Syrian TV aired the aftermath of twin car bombings in the western city of Homs Sunday. A monitoring group says at least 46 people were killed and more than 100 others injured, one of the deadliest such attacks in Homs in 5 years of civil war. The attacks came one day after the Syrian government made advances on Islamic State targets, though there was no immediate claim of responsibility from the group. On Sunday, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he and his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov reached a provisional agreement for a ceasefire in Syria, where Russia is aiding a government forces in attack on Islamic State.
And I take nothing for granted about this. A cessation of hostilities, a hudna, is possible over the course of these next hours.
Opposition leader arrested as supporters planned peaceful march to electoral communists in demand of proof of poll outcome. Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye have been bundled into a van outside his home by police as his supporters plan to march a protest against the results of a presidential election. The Forum for Democratic Change party leader have been under heavy police guard since he was placed under house arrest on Saturday, shortly before the election results were announced. President Yoweri Museveni's rule was extended from a fourth decade. Besigye was earlier arrested on election day on Thursday as he tried to show journalists that he was said a vote-rigging operation in a suburban house. He was also arrested on a separate occasion during election week when he tried to hold a rally in the central of the capital, Kampala. Viewers will... People in Taipei visit a 3-story upside-down house which took more than $600,000 and 2 months to complete. A 3-story high house that is entirely upside down attracted hundreds of people wanting to take a look at downtown Taipei. The house was furnished in the American country style with real-size chairs, tables, a toilet wall, and even a car stuck to the ceiling. Construction was delayed by constant rain in January, but workers were in full swing to meet the deadline. The house finally opened its doors to the public 1 week later than scheduled on February 6th and will be open for display until July 22nd. The family-sized house, including a living room, a bathroom, a garage, and other rooms, was about 334 square meters of floor space, organizers said, adding that the whole process of construction took around 2 months and cost around $600,000. Police have detained a Poland national in connection with recent ATM frauds in Dhaka from city's Gulshan diplomatic zone area. The arrested man is identified as Thomas Peter. Dhaka Metropolitan Police DC Media Maruf Hussain Shardar confirmed this on Monday morning. Police arrested another one foreigner on February 18th. Recently, miscreants withdrew Taka 80,000 from different ATM booths in the capital through forgery. Viewers, now the business news. Asian share markets rose on Monday, extending last week's gain as investors awaited a rush of February industry surveys to take the pulse of the global economy, while sterling stumbled on concerns the UK might yet vote to leave the European Union. Despite the fresh Brexit uncertainty, financial spread bettors expected European stock markets to open higher, also with Britain's FTSE. FTSE seen up 0.50%, Germany's DAX 0.37%, and France's CAC 40 0.54%. E-mini futures for the S&P 500 ESC1 were up 0.6%, but much of the day's action was in currency markets, where sterling tumbled on worries that Britain may quit the European Union flared up after London Mayor Boris Johnson threw his weight behind the exit campaign. It slid as far as $1.4235 from around $1.4405 late on Friday, after stabilizing around $1.4275, down 0.9% on the day. Against the yen, it slumped to as low as 160.40 yen, its lowest since November 2013, from 162.10 late on Friday before partially rebounding. HSBC said on Monday it was being investigated by the Securities and Exchange Commission in relation to hiring practice of candidates with ties to the government officials in Asia. In a footnote to its earnings statement, the bank said it had received various requests of information from the SEC, which was also targeting other financial industries as part of the same probe. HSBC has received various requests for information and it's cooperating with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission investigation. It would be inappropriate to comment further, HSBC spokesperson Gareth Hewitt told Reuters. Oil prices recovered on Monday following street issues in the previous session, supported by a fall in the number of U.S. high in rice, but analysts say general oversupply was keeping the market weak. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures CLC1 rose nearly $0.50 from the last settlement to above $30 per barrel, trading $30.11 at 0.0413 GMT. International benchmark Brent LCOC1 was up 45 cents at $33.46 per barrel. Both contracts fell almost 4% on Friday. A falling rig count in the United States, which is expected to lead to a decline in 2016 production, helped support prices, analysts said. The U.S. oil rig counts continue to decline, with a total of 26 rigs idled, Goldman Sachs said. Viewers, now the science, technology and environment news. Smartphone rivals Samsung Electronics Corporation Limited and LG Electronics Incorporation unveiled their latest flagship devices on Sunday, seeking to revive sales momentum and buck slowing industry growth. Phone makers face another tough year in 2016 as subdued global growth and persisting currency weakness in key emerging markets sapped consumers' spending power. A push by Chinese manufacturers to expand overseas amid slowing growth in their domestic market may also undercut margins further. In a bid to recapture market share, Samsung launched 2 new versions of its Galaxy S smartphones and brought in Facebook Incorporation chief executive Mark Zuckerberg for a surprise appearance to tout the potential of virtual reality, prompting hundreds of people to rush to the stage to record the moment. LG, which lost money from its mobile business last year as its flagship product struggled, introduced a modular design to its new G5 smartphones that allows users to replace or upgrade functions such as camera and audio independently. Viewers will take. Fiji began a massive cleanup on Monday after one of the most powerful storms recorded in the southern hemisphere tore through the Pacific island nation, killing 17 people, flattening remote villages and cutting off communications. 8 agencies warned of a widespread health crisis, particularly in low-lying areas where thousands of Fiji's 900,000 people live in tin stacks after crops were wiped out and fresh water supplies blocked. Almost 8,000 people remained hunkered down in hundreds of evacuation centers across Fiji, where they had headed before tropical cyclone Winston hit late on Saturday with winds of up to 325 km per hour. The death toll from Cyclone Winston continues to rise and reports of widespread damage are coming in from across Fiji, said New Zealand Foreign Minister Murray McCully. Viewers, now the entertainment news. Deadpool dominated the box office for a second consecutive weekend, racking up $55 million.
They've been diagnosed with terminal cancer.
That's roughly what Fox, the studio behind the $58 million comic book adaptation, had predicted that the film would open to a week ago. Of course, it shattered those projections, destroying February records with a $152.2 million precedent weekend launch. After 2 weeks, Deadpool has now earned $235.4 million domestically, re-established Ryan Reynolds as a major Hollywood star, and created a new superhero franchise to rival the likes of Iron Man and X-Men. The picture, a very R-rated affair, centers on a mercenary with accelerated hitting abilities and a penchant of body humor. It's one of those times where a movie becomes a touchstone in culture, said Chris Aronson, Fox's domestic distribution chief.
Where does he go?
Jealous novelists criticized his novels, but readers around the globe devoured his dazzling brilliance. The news of the death of someone like Umberto Eco hits you like a thunderbolt when you least expect it, and you don't know what hit you. It leaves you blank, suddenly emptied, eerily silent. What does that even mean? Umberto Eco, 84, best-selling academic who navigated two worlds, dies. I have had that feeling before, 3 or 4 times I think, when my most immediate teachers, George MacDisey and Philip Rife, died, and then when Edward Said died, and then when Ingmar Bergman died while I was in fact in Sweden. You stare into the world, but for a moment you don't see anything. It is as if the light in your eyes is gone. You cannot hear anything. It is as if your life has been suddenly silenced. A towering presence. I met Eco in the late 1980s or maybe in early 1990s. I cannot remember now. Soon after I had joined Columbia and had come here by the invitation of her Casa Italiana to deliver a lecture series. A federal judge in Massachusetts on Sunday might rejected attempts by the wife of comedian Bill Cosby to halt her upcoming deposition in a defamation case brought by 7 women against the disgraced entertainer, records showed. Camille Cosby's lawyers late on Saturday filed an emergency motion to delay her deposition scheduled for Monday, pending an appeal to a judge's Friday ruling not to stay the proceeding. They argued their deposition would create a media circus and threaten her personal safety. U.S. District Judge Mark Mastroianni ruled late on Sunday night that the deposition would go ahead on Monday morning. He also ordered the attorneys to court for a brief status conference ahead of the meeting. Lawyers for the 7 women fired back at the Camille Cosby's motion on Sunday, saying the claims were without merit. Viewers, now the sports news. The Toronto Raptors made no moves as the NBA trade deadlines approached and passed. The Memphis Grizzlies were busy. It looked that way on Sunday. The Raptors played like a team that had stayed together and defeated the Grizzlies 98-85, led by 21 points from guard DeMar DeRozan. A combination of trades and injuries had the Grizzlies in full regrouping mode. "Really battled our tails off," Grizzlies coach David Jorger said. "We kept playing hard. We are going to find ourselves in position to win games. For having a group that's just coming together in the last 48 hours to go 1-1 this weekend, that's pretty good." Guard Kyle Lowry added 18 points and 7 assists for the Raptors, 36-18, who had lost their previous 2 games. "I thought the defense was in-game," Raptors coach Tony Cassis said. "Everyone's knees were bent down in the stands, ready to play and out of vacation mode." Forward Jack Randolph scored 18 points and grabbed 6 rebounds for the Grizzlies, 30-33, and had won their 2 previous games. The hosting United States were drawn into the group of death for the 2016 Copa America Counterreno on Sunday, opening against Colombia in the 100th anniversary of soccer's oldest international championship. The U.S. side topped Group A as one of the 4-seeded teams for the tournament as the hosts and landed a pair of 2014 World Cup quarter-finalists in Colombia and Costa Rica, along with Paraguay in their 4-team cluster in which 2 teams will advance. Their match against Colombia on June 3rd as Levi's Stadiums in Santa Clara, California, launches a 16-team version of the South American Championship that has expanded by 4 teams and is being staged outside the South American CONMEBOL nations for the first time. "I take full responsibility and apologize to the nation," 1994 U.S. World Cup player Alexi Lalas told reporters after pulling out the balls that gave the U.S. an uphill climb and brought crowds from a packed audience at Hammerstein Ballroom. Brazil opens Group B against Ecuador at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California on June 4th, one day before Mexico gets the tough Group C against 15-times winner Uruguay in University of Phoenix Stadium at Glendale, Arizona. Argentina, a 14-times winner of the championship and host of the inaugural competition in 1916, begins Group D play against defending champions Chile on June 6th at Levi's Stadium. Viewers, let's have a look at Millennium TV News Recap. Amor Ekushe International Mother Language Day observed at UN Mission. Stay watchful against distortion of Bangla Prime Minister. Trump wins decisively in South Carolina, Clinton clinches Nevada. Republican Jeb Bush ends 2016 presidential campaign. Violence rages in Syria as Kerry and Lavrov reach provisional deal on ceasefire. You are up to date with the top stories so far here on Millennium TV, and don't forget to log into www.millenniumtv.net. Thank you and stay with Millennium TV. Allah Hafiz.